Hello and welcome to the Hybrid Warfare Analytical Group podcast. Today, Moldova is on our radar, and we will discuss the first round of presidential elections which were held in Moldova on 20th of October 2024, and also the European Union membership referendum which was held simultaneously. Today, I, Vladimir Silvean, the head of Hybrid Warfare Analytical Group, will host our podcast, and with me are my colleagues Anastasia Rudeeva and Victoria Odesandova, who will also analyze the informational agenda which Russia posed against Moldova. So to start with, I'd like to remind you the results of the referendum, which was quite lower than observers predicated before. So the final result was about 50.46% of the respondents who voted for Moldova accession to the European Union. At the same time, 42% of voters supported the re-election of the current president of the country, Maia Sandu. Former Prosecutor General Alexander Stoyanoglu came second, having about 26% of the voters. So we have a 15% lead over the competitor, but that does not guarantee Maia Sandu an easy victory in the second round of the elections, because candidates from opposition are mainly pro-Russian. I mean, Renato Usati, Irina Vlach, who was previously the Bashkan of Gagauzi Autonomous Region of Moldova, and also Vasily Tarolev, former prime minister. Mostly all of their opposition candidates who came third, fourth, fifth place of the election list, they are mainly pro-Russian. And now we may see the attempt to gather all the oppositional pro-Russian electorate in attempt to overcome Maia Sandu. And the second issue which I'd like to discuss today is obviously the weak result of the pro-European referendum about support for European Union membership for Moldova. And in this regard, it is worth to mention that President of Moldova, Maia Sandu, explained the problems with the referendum by the fact that Moldova allegedly faced an unprecedented attack of freedom and democracy that was the result of an external conspiracy. According to her, law enforcement agencies have clear evidence that these criminal groups brought 300,000 votes, committing fraud and unprecedented scale. However, until today, we do not obtain any clear evidences from Moldova officials about this interference and how it was conducted. At the same time, it is worth mentioning that pro-Russian opposition leader who was abandoned from participating in elections, Ilan Shor, who led the opposition bloc Victory, announced his intention to legally change the results of the referendum in Moldova and accusing Moldovan officials for fraud. So we are witnessing that Kremlin, through its puppets, tried to undermine the results of the referendum. In this regard, I'd like to ask my colleagues how Russia interfere the election process in Moldova. First, I'd like to ask Anastasia, how does Russia support the election campaign of Mr. Stoyanoglu, which came second and is pro-Russian candidate? So whether you mentioned the direct support from Russians.
Thank you, Vladimir. The 2024 Moldovan presidential election underscores the Kremlin's ongoing attempts to exert influence through the candidacy of Alexander Stoyanoglu and the pro-Russian messaging framework. Russian media presents Stoyanoglu as an alternative to Western democratic values, promoting a narrative that Moldova's prosperity hinges on established ties with Russia. Pro-Russian media actively uses such narratives and propaganda techniques as economic emphasis, political neutrality, and skepticism of European democracy. Kremlin-backed media leveraged Noglu's candidacy to promote Russian influence in Moldova by pushing narratives that resonate with Moldova's socio-economic challenges. This strategy involves those narratives which I was mentioned earlier. Economic emphasis. Russian propaganda highlight Moldova's reliance on Russian trade and resources as necessary for growth, and it resonates with Sonoglu's positioning and statements. Also, there is political neutrality in a way of education for Moldova's neutrality to counteract NATO or European Union influences and messages that benefits Russia's interests. And skepticism or European democracy is questioning the legitimacy of European Union-supported governance, alleging manipulation and repression within the electoral process. But Stoyanoglu himself is not the only aim of Russian propaganda. His statements is really reliable with Russian and Kremlin official positioning, but also pro-Russian media in Moldova particularly actively criticized President Maia Sandu, portraying her European alignment as anti-democratic and accusing her of European Union-backed election manipulations. These outlets like Sputnik Moldova, Russia Today Moldova highlight claims of discrimination and censorship against the opposition. Propagandists like Sergei Markov allege that the European Union is complicit in efforts to secure Sandu's re-election by undermining pro-Russian candidates. Thus framing European involvement as external interference, which is classic Russian tactics in propaganda. And this election serves as a pivotal moment in Moldova's political alignment, with Russian propaganda efforts directed at curbing pro-European momentum and reinforcing Moldova's dependence on Russia as a counterbalance to European influence.
Thanks. So here we comes to the European Union referendum. The results are obviously not such convincing as many observers predicted before. So I'd like to ask Tori to tell us about Russians' attempts to informationally interfere and underscore the results.
There was a huge campaign of how this whole referendum is just a way for the UN to use Moldova in the war against Ukraine, how they want to basically involve Moldova in the war, start the war in Prидnestrovia, and then attack Russia using Moldova's hands. So that was also a huge point. And one more narrative that I would like to highlight is how even before the referendum and a little bit after, some experts were trying this line of, but what happens if we do lose control over Moldova, if the referendum is if basically the referendum ends with the pro-UN vote. And it is quite interesting that this line was pushed, because that is a sort of a way for Kremlin to do damage control even before anything happened, to push some experts that are saying, but basically we don't lose anything if we lose control over Moldova, if we lose control over Pridnestrovia in the results. And then pushing these experts against someone who is saying, but what about our own Russian-speaking people there? Shouldn't we go to another war to protect those people? It looked as a way of trying to gather people's opinions, trying to gather what the moods are on both points and what the potential consequences might be. So this is also perhaps a way for Kremlin to kind of gather intel on how much they should invest in their campaign, because we do not have any specific gathered proof about it, but we've had European and we've had a lot of Moldovan diplomats and politicians saying about how the election and the referendum process was influenced by Russia, how they were running interference, basically. So it could be that this whole, what happens if we lose it? What happens if we don't lose it? It was all a way of checking the temperature and checking basically how much will acceptance, the support for Kremlin drop if the Moldova referendum goes pro-UN.
Well, and what do you think about the influence of Maya Sandu's personal rating and anti-rating on the results of the referendum? Because, or maybe that was just a gesture against their current leadership and personally Maya Sandu.
Yes, it could be connected to Maya Sandu personally, but also I think in this case it would be more of the opposite of how you choose, if you want to choose the opposite of Russia, you have to vote for Maya Sandu because she's the candidate that represents it, and she's the strongest candidate with the most chances to represent that. So yeah, you kind of in a way cannot divide one from the other.
Thanks for your analysis. So here we come to the conclusion. And finally, I'd like to mark that considering that Moldova is a parliamentary republic, the final alignment of political forces will be known only in 2025 when parliamentary elections will be held. So I think that the main battle will occur a year later. And now we're faced with signs that Russia tries to keep Moldova in its geopolitical orbit, and it has pretty much potential to keep Moldova under its umbrella and overcome the European path for Chisinau. So that's it for today, and thank you for participating, and keep in touch.